informative, educational, objective, inclusive, comprehensive. This is Progress Report. Updates and conversations from the Government Information Service.
Good day and welcome to another episode of Progress Report. My name is Ivan Khanna, my lovely co-host Ms. Gleneva Hodge, and in the studios today we have two special guests. We're going to be deep diving into some interesting things.
Yes, I'm excited.
You're excited?
I'm excited.
All right,
I've been waiting for this for a while.
I know. This should have happened way back when. Let's say way back when, but it's happening now. We had a number of things that slowed the wall down.
You think?
Slowed the wall down. It's hard to believe that we are on the north side of a global pandemic, so to speak. Still battling. Little things here or there. You still see cases popping up, but from what we came through, the lockdowns, government stopped. Financing stopped, economy stopped. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. It's something that we'll be able to tell our grandkids, great grandkids. Hopefully they don't. They don't. Oh my God! Let's not even go there.
I know.
I don't want to go there. But there was something extremely important, legislatively, from the community that was supposed to be happening right around that time, and we're going to deep dive into that today. But before we do that, let's have our guests introduce themselves. We're not going to do it today. We're going to have our guests introduce themselves. So their voices grace the podcast, grace the airwaves, grace every platform that we're on. Introduce yourself for us.
So, good morning. I am Twyla Bradshaw Richardson. I work in the Ministry of Health. I'm the Director of the Chronic Disease Unit.
Hi, and I'm Sarah Williams, and I work at the UK Department of Health as a Tobacco Control Programme Manager, and I have been working remotely with Twyla for 5.5 years now, so we've been on a long journey together, but this is my first visit to Anguilla, and it's absolutely great to be here.
Are you?
Sounds like a long distance relationship.
And we're still together.
I love that. 5.5 years. You've been working together remotely for 5.5 years.
Yes.
What has kept you guys together for 5.5 years?
Passion.
Yeah.
I will really say passion, want to see something important come true. But before we go down to that, let me just put some things in context. Okay? So, as I say, I'm the Director of the Chronic Disease Unit. The unit was conceptualized in 2015. And the reason the unit came into place, it actually merged the HIV program. I don't know if any you, and if Ivan old enough to remember, there was an HIV program.
Well, thank you.
There was an HIV program, and when we looked at the health data, we realized that the chronic diseases, and in this context, the chronic diseases are the cancers, the diabetes, the cardiovascular diseases, and the respiratory diseases. Cardiovascular disease would include hypertension. So those were the burden of Anguilla. Could you imagine half of the healthcare budget used to go, is still going into dialysis treatment alone, not other things of expense to health. So chronic disease, it has been a problem and is a problem. So the government at that time thought that it was best to put in a unit dedicated solely to putting measures in place, responses to curb the escalation of chronic diseases. So that's where the unit concept came in. Now, so we are looking at those 4 major diseases. Those 4 major diseases has 4 major modifiable risk factors, meaning risk factors you can do something about. So to make it really quick, those risk factors are unhealthy diets, inactive bodies, like lack of physical activities, abuse of alcohol, and tobacco. So we wanted to start with a database, because if you go on the street and you ask the normal man, where's your burden? Everyone has a story, but we needed to put, not only to have some data for evidence to drive action, so we have evidence-based action, we also thought it was important that we can measure our success later down, right? So that's why we started. So when we did a STEP survey in 2016, a year after the unit was conceptualized, we found, and I'm going to speak particular to tobacco, because that's why we're here, we found that we had a smoking prevalence of just about 5%, but we had exposure to tobacco smoking 13%. You can see it's doubled. We also did the Global School Health Survey in that year, which is a youth survey, and it's similar. The exposure was really low, but their smoking prevalence was really low, but the exposure was triple that in the youth. And smoking initiation started from the time persons were 11. So we do have a tobacco problem. So that's where we started a conversation with, we need to do something regarding tobacco. I'm sure Sarah can tell you the dangers of tobacco.
Yeah, so I'm gonna. If you want to kind of really understand quite how bad smoking is, I'm gonna do like a bit of a guessing game with the two of you.
I love stuff like this. I don't
Go on,
lose.
you ready?
I don't lose, okay?
All right, okay. I mean, we're gonna make this. We're gonna see how close you get. So we kicked off this conversation by talking about COVID, right? And we just saw the entire world shut down and everything kind of stop, right? So in the last 3 years, COVID has killed around the world about 7 million people.
Right.
In the same period of time, do you think that tobacco has killed more people or less people since in the same time that COVID's been going on?
33 million.
33 million. So
I was just going to say more. But okay, Ivan.
Well, you've blown my guessing game because it's lower than that and it doesn't work. But yeah, basically COVID has killed 7 million people in the whole 3 years. And in the same period of time, about 24 million people have died because of tobacco, right?
I thought it was like 3 times the amount.
It is, just over
So
3
just about,
times.
yeah, it's
It's just that your maths didn't get
Yeah,
you to
my
So
math-
square.
my
the
math-
math was wrong, but the idea was right.
Yeah, my
The
math-
walking was
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
The walking
yeah.
was right.
That's exactly what I did. I was trying to work out what 18 years ago was, and I said it was like 1997, and someone told me it was like 2004, and it blew my mind.
Yes.
Yes.
Never cease to amaze me.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, that's how bad tobacco is, right? So it causes cancers and heart disease and diabetes. Lots of people don't know that it causes diabetes, but it also causes diabetes. It causes emphysema and breathing problems. It can cause depression. It can cause schizophrenia. It can make you go blind. It can cause your teeth to fall out. Your skin,
But
everything.
But how is it that people rely so heavily on nicotine and all these other things, stress relievers and all these things? I mean, there's good and bad and everything, the yin and the yang. But anybody listening today probably should be throwing their cigarettes, their tobacco, their stuff in the trash after hearing that it's killed 3 times the amount of people that COVID did.
But it's also really addictive.
It's addictive.
And this is the thing, right? So I'm an ex-smoker, right? And I started smoking, God, I probably had my first cigarette when I was like 12 or 13, something like. My younger sister had her first cigarette, and I'm saying this because I don't think that her children will watch, and I don't think that her children should know this. But like, she was kind of 10 or 11 when she had her first cigarette, right?
And
So when you're kind of 16, when I was 16, I could legally buy cigarettes, or 18. Basically, you're already addicted. You become addicted as a child, and it's really addictive. Tobacco in particular. So, like, nicotine is addictive, but tobacco in particular is really addictive because of the way your body kind of absorbs the nicotine. Like, you just get this really big hit, right? It's like when you have, I don't know, a double espresso and you just kind of feel it straight away, right?
I can't drink coffee.
Exactly. But like if you have a cup of tea that's got like a bit of caffeine in, it's nice and slow. So with tobacco, when you smoke it, it burns and you get that really. If anybody who is a smoker will just know that feeling of really wanting a cigarette, and then like it's like itch under your skin, and then you smoke the cigarette and you're like, oh, that's so much better, right?
Wow.
So it's really addictive, and that's why, like, relapse. I mean, I don't smoke now. I have no idea how many times I stopped smoking before I stopped smoking, right?
Yeah.
So there'll be lots of people who listen and they'll be like, oh yeah, I stopped yesterday, and then by 3 o'clock in the afternoon I was smoking again. So people can stop smoking, right? There's ways, and one of the things that we've been talking about this week is there's good ways of doing it and bad ways of doing it, like, you know, if you can get support and all that kind of stuff. But it's children that become addicted to smoking. It's not adults. You're not starting this at like 30. You're starting this as a child. And as a children, we recognise that they don't have the same, like, almost like ability to choose. That's why we say you can't buy alcohol until you're 18, because we say before that you can't make decisions in the same way that an adult makes decisions.
Right.
But the tobacco industry, that, you know, they spend millions of dollars on marketing around the world, and they make sure that the packets look nice.
Yeah, and tell you smoking kills.
Yeah. But they do, you know, they make it all look nice. They get it on the TV. They get it on all of these kind of things. So you have children who will think that it's really cool.
Ooh.
And the thing is, when you're 14, right? I don't know. Maybe you were a different 14-year-old to me. But when I was 14, I knew one thing. I mean, like, I was never going to die, right? Like, you're immortal at the age of 14, right?
Oh.
One day you're going to get old, but, like, when you're 40, when you're that old, and you're going to have to worry about these things. And I'll tell you, the other thing at 14, I was not going to listen to many things. If my parents said, like, don't do something, I'd be like, yeah. And then I was going to do something different. Maybe all of you were far better than I was at 14, but I think there's a lot of 14-year-olds who think the same way. So telling them not to smoke because it's bad for you and one day when you're old you'll die, I don't think that works.
I don't think it's that we were far better. I think you just didn't have my mother for and the thought of smoking, I would have died at the thought of smoking because she'd have read my thoughts and killed me at 14 for thinking about smoking.
But that's actually an interesting point, Evan, because, you know, I'm listening and I was kind of startled by Twyla's figures because we don't have a culture of smoking cigarettes, you know, and tobacco, and it's, I don't think it exists largely now as it did in the past, because I would hear stories of, at least in my mind, just, I didn't think then that it existed the way that it did in the past, because I would hear stories of my grandparents speaking about the people in the village who used to chew tobacco. Not necessarily smoke it, but you know, you heard about the chewing of the tobacco and the. It always sounded a little bit gross to me, to be quite honest. But I think culturally, and maybe it might be our climate as well, because I'm always aware that, you know, the family that I have in the UK, they smoked, and the family here was like, could not understand. It's like, is it that it's cold? That you need to put some warmth in your body. So listening to that, it's like the cultural differences also play. So hearing that we have one, I'm not surprised that our exposure rates are higher. But that moving that our exposure rates are higher. We are having some little technical difficulties in the background if our listeners heard that. I'm not surprised that our exposure rates are higher because we are exposed to persons from different cultures who do come in, especially those who work in the tourism industry. And you're surrounded by persons who are smokers, who come from a culture where smoking is not as taboo as it is here, because like Ivan said, I know that I know my mom would have dragged me, and I have a 14-year-old, and I will drag her.
I have a 14-year-old, and it's not even dragging. I would enter him. Yeah, that's what it is.
The thing is, that's the beauty of data, because I remember when we sat in the ministry, we said we're doing the step survey. we are looking like we don't even need to ask tobacco questions. We know tobacco is not an issue in Anguilla. We don't. Nobody smokes. You don't see anywhere you see anyone smoke is probably, as you say, in that sector, the tourism sector. So we too was surprised, and that's the beauty of having data. That's the beauty of having evidence that you can measure against. And it's not even only in the adult population. Children are smoking cigarettes. Children are smoking cigarettes. I remember even having a conversation with Sarah and said, when we talked about looking at banning single sale of the cigarettes, like taking one out of the pack and selling it, they were like, nobody does that here.
And they do it here.
Listen, as I tell you, evidence works, and you can't lead on assumptions because you assume things, and that is good to actually have the data, do your research, understand the environment, go around spot check, because we do. And it is a concern, and as Sarah alluded to, no exposure to tobacco is safe. None, absolutely none. And probably...
No, sorry. I don't want us to jump over that. You said none. Zilch. What's another word for none? Zero.
Nil.
Nil. Nada.
None.
Is okay.
None. Because strange enough, and this might be a little controversial, but strange enough, when we talk about the NCDs, the non-communicable diseases, and the modifiable risk factors that you can do something about, when it comes to alcohol, it is the abuse of alcohol. So some levels of alcohol are okay. Some levels of alcohol are not as dangerous. It's the abuse of. And that's a different conversation when we come back with the alcohol. But when it comes...
themselves.
I love when our guests do that. It saves me from having to do it.
It saves me from doing what you tell me to do.
But when it comes to tobacco, it's none. You know, it's not the abuse of tobacco.
It's just
it is
bad.
no tobacco. Tobacco is bad.
And I think it's worth... So I work with we work on this... There's like an international law, basically. And there are lots of international laws. So, you know, you have treaties and you have all of this kind of stuff. And there is only one international law on public health. And it's called the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And it basically just means there's an international law on on tobacco. So... The reason that there is only the reason they focused on tobacco, you know, they could have decided to do it on alcohol or whatever, but they focused on tobacco because tobacco is the biggest global killer. You know, it kills more than alcohol, and it's because exactly of what Tyler was saying. There's just, you know, there isn't a safe level of exposure, so. 2 cigarettes a day is still bad for you. You know, and like being exposed to other people's smoke is bad for you. All of that. It's so bad for you.
So I'm glad you went secondhand smoke, because in my mind, my head is going, smoking, secondhand smoke is if you're in the vicinity of someone smoking.
Right.
But I also know that there's third hand smoke.
That is what is claimed. Do you want to go down, everyone?
Yeah, there is a strong evidence on secondhand smoke, right? So, for example, we brought smoke-free laws in England about 17 years ago, I think. I'm trying to do my maths. And there was kind of studies that were done, and the levels of heart attacks in people who were working in bars went down, right? So it wasn't they were smoking, like the exposure to second-hand smoke was more likely to trigger a heart attack or something like that. Some people look at third-hand smoke. So third-hand smoke is basically when... So let's say, like it's almost kind of stuff that might be left on the walls or on your skin or something like that. So if you've had a cigarette and you put the cigarette out and you haven't washed your hands after having a cigarette, then you would have third-hand smoke on your fingers. You know what? It's not likely to be good, right? But there's not the same level of evidence. It's second-hand smoke. Exactly, second-hand smoke.
But third-hand smoke would also take... Have you ever rented a car? And you walking and
that is kind of where I was
because you can't get that out. Like I feel when I sit on the chair, I feel like
and hotel rooms and
the
constantly
cleaning. I get you.
I've seen I do TikTok. And I've seen pictures of and videos of persons who have apartments and spaces that they rent out, and that they were persons who smoked, who lived there for long periods of time, and when they go in to do the renovations and they're cleaning the walls and you can actually see it. And I'm thinking, this cannot be good. Like, and so the reason I went there was because when we were looking at, and we haven't really gotten into what this tobacco legislation would look like. But about 15 years ago, I lived in the BVI, and at that time, they banned
age.
I just had to get that up there, didn't you? But yeah, around that time, I know that they put in place a ban of smoking in public spaces and in hotel rooms, so as to avoid that. And I can tell you, it's ever since that day I have been looking forward for that to be enacted here in Anguilla. And the reason it always came to mind was because we would go out and you'd go to the restaurants at the hotels and stuff, and my mom, I know her sinus, her whole face just completely, her sinus just activates if she's anywhere in, and it's like, she was always, when are they gonna ban smoking in public places? And it was one of those things that she was like, you need to get that done. So that's why, one of the reasons why I was so excited to hear about this, and it's been, I know, a long time coming. What are some of the things that we can expect to see in this legislation?
So, from the STEP survey as mentioned, we were concerned about the exposure to secondhand smoke, and at that time we thought, okay, we are going to just go down and ban smoking in public spaces. But again, it's important to fit things to context. And when we look around, even though we don't have a large smoking population, you wouldn't see the tobacco companies sponsoring large events. We thought, why don't be proactive for once? Why always be reactive? So we don't have that, but why not let us put all these measures in place now, and so we don't ever get it? Because during Sarah's presentations, I've learned from working on the tobacco legislation that places who had a low prevalence of tobacco and they put in very minimal measures or no measures, their prevalence rate started to go up. And so we thought, it's low now, let's keep it low and let's drive to get it lower. So what does it include? There are 3 articles from the international law that we looked at. It has several different articles. We look specifically at 3 articles. The one that dealt, it's 8, 11, and 13, right? Did my homework. 5 years is a long time. 8, 11, and 13. What those articles deal with is 1, controlling imports. So any products coming to our shows, they have to have on those health labels. What in terms of the size and what it needs to say, those things will come in the regulations thereafter. But it must contain those health labels to say tobacco kills, smoking is bad for your health. The good thing about us, again, because international laws exist, most likely anything that's coming here already have those in. So that will be our first line of defense, to make sure anything coming to our ports have those markings. In terms of advertising, sponsorship, those things would not be possible. So you cannot have a tobacco company sponsoring any public event or anything, or nor can they advertise in terms of this thing. So you're not going to see a large billboards up with the Camel and Marlboro. Yeah, those things are would be prohibited once the law is passed in its current context.
So there's going to be no sponsorship of Progress Report
from the tobacco company.
Oh, so devastated.
You can't use it as an incentive. So it's not buy a cup of a can of milk and you get a pack of cigarettes free. There's no incentives to get it.
I just want to pause here. For somebody that deals with sinus, me, I don't think milk and cigarette smoke should go together either way. I'm here like, oh, so you're going to pick up a casket, huh?
is a bad example.
But I see
But
where
you
you're
can't
going
marry
now.
goods. You can't marry to another product to get it off your shelf. Those things will be prohibited. Protection of our children. So the age where you can sell a tobacco product. Currently we have it as 18.
21. I want
18.
21. vote for 21.
We've heard that in our discussions as we go around.
And I will say that at your consultations as well. I'm not even taking my hand down until I say that the consultation. How far is the consultation?
The consultation would hopefully be after the first reading of the bill.
Okay.
Right?
I'm
It
gonna
would
take
be
We
my
have
hand
heard
down.
that from a couple of people as well.
Yes.
So we're
So
gonna take
that
that.
has that has been a thing. So
Yeah,
when we
let's
go
go for
back to
25.
our legal team, that will be one of the things that have been suggested by of different sectors. So so the age currently, as the last date is 18, the draft says is 18. So you neither can you sell to them nor can they sell on your behalf. So if you have your son, daughter running the village shop and somebody come in there to buy cigarettes, they cannot handle it. It will be illegal.
Yeah, I've seen kids run in the shop to buy
But-
2 cigarettes
right.
to somebody. I've seen
Yeah.
that. So would this also put pressure on establishments, businesses to have signage?
Yes.
And I want big signage too.
The regulations going to determine how big the signage are.
Big,
these
huge.
things. But of course, they have to have up signage similar to what we do now with alcohol, no selling thing. These are the things. The same will apply now for tobacco, but how that would look will be now in the regulations.
Okay, so can I
Want
make
it
a
big.
suggestion?
Yes.
Outside, inside, when you're leaving, and other places, not just where it's at. Like because so from a marketing perspective, it's about repetition of the message.
It is.
Right.
And you need to have that. You need to make this feel like you're gonna get arrested if you do it. You want not necessarily instill some fear, but you want like, why is this so bad? Let them go do their own research that you are pushing this thing to that level.
Why is instilling fear such a bad thing? You didn't because Etta told you not to.
Yeah.
There are some cases that I
Need some
believe
fear.
fear just should be one of those
Well,
things.
then go right there.
It
You
works.
said it. You said it. I didn't. But
It's
I
harmless,
think.
but it works.
Yeah, I think everywhere. I think from as much as can be put into the legislation, because Gleneva talks about this all the time. So Gleneva, I'm not gonna talk her business behind her back. So I'm gonna look at her. Gleneva is the one that reads all the exco papers. Gleneva goes and she reads like code transcripts. She is
Wow.
informed, so she knows what's going
Got
on.
to lie with you.
She knows what's
Yeah.
going on. But I'm saying like you alluded to this stuff. There's so much happening in our dynamics and our changing industry. I want to see this stuff at the port. I want people to know that Anguilla is not about this tobacco thing. So I want the legislation to cover things like these because things go amiss and then they never come back for amendment.
I'm
That's
actually
true.
glad that you went there. And so, 2 things. One, I'm glad that you went there in terms of making sure that it's out there, people are aware. And Twyla kind of brushed the surface of it when she said, the same that happens with alcohol.
Right.
And one of the things that we're concerned about, and I understand why tobacco is even more so an issue than alcohol because, one exposure, that's it, as opposed to the abuse of alcohol. But we know, and we don't sugarcoat anything, we know that we
To get uncomfortable.
not at all. But we do know that we have an issue with the enforcement side
Yeah.
of the legislation that currently exists as it relates to alcohol. What do you envision happening to ensure the enforcement of this legislation? Because having legislation, that's one of the things that bugs me, quite honestly. We can have legislation, but if there's no enforcement of it, then it's just words on paper.
Okay. You said it so well. In order for a legislation to be effective, it must have enforcement. It must be relevant as well. So we need to go back time to time to go back and see, do we need to amend anything here or there? The thing with the tobacco, we are the policemen. The law dictates who are the enforcement officers, but at the end of the day, could you imagine if every shop selling single cigarettes, especially if it's low key, like persons are not seeing it every day, it will be very hard for those enforcement officers to know. So everyone in Angola have to be our brother's keeper.
Right.
We have to be the gatekeepers for our public health, law, safety, and it comes down to people being aware of that this is illegal,
Right.
and where do you go to report such illegal activity? Of course, our officers will do the vigilance, but again, in order for it to be effective, it takes each and every member of society to be the watchdog, and that's the honest truth when it comes to tobacco. So it's really up to the community.
I mean, we don't have the legislation in front of us, and I'm not speaking out of turn. Everybody knows me. I'm going to say what I think because a Christian young man, as a man, think it's so easy, so I might as well say. Can the fine be like $50,000? I don't want no $500 fines, is what I'm saying.
You want it drastic
I want
enough
it
that
drastic enough.
Again, there's the fear that
Because
there must be.
if they're going to sell 400 cigarettes a day, and their fine for selling a single cigarette, is 150 EC dollars, they're going to sell 400 cigarettes a day.
The thing is, in making laws, you know how it works. We have to harmonize. Say the word, Glenn, I know you know it.
To harmonize.
Yes, laws. And so we can't have the penalty for alcohol. I'm no lawyer, but it's rational thinking and true discussions for as $300, and then you're gonna put tobacco at $7,000.
Why not?
It doesn't work that way.
But you just told me tobacco kills 3 times the amount.
So if you have the alcohol at 300, then tobacco might be about 750, but it can be 7,000.
No, I
so
don't. I can't.
That's why you're not a liar. But
Every
it has to be
consultation
reasonable.
I gotta make these things.
It has to be reasonable and accepted as well. It can be draconian. They have to have some measures of balance.
So let's bring up alcohol then.
Let's bring up all fines and all
All
other
fines,
things, because you have to
because-
look at traffic fines. So that's why you
Right.
have the legal team
Yes.
that would when they're drafting, they have to measure all these things to create that balance.
I get that, buddy, but here's my problem with that. The statistics you just quoted are startling, are frightening, are of major concern.
Right.
And then you're going to tell me what shut down the wall for 2 years. Tobacco kills 3 times the amount of people. We shut down the world. We shut down the world for something that killed 7 million people. We are afraid to put in a sizable fine for something that kills 3 times the amount. Like I don't see the rationale. I don't.
So I
get
look
it.
forward to these consultations because
Something-
I am going to be right there with
I
you
will
because
be there.
I anticipate that this will be very feisty and fiery.
But you see.
But there's I agree with you.
Oh my gosh.
But even speaking about harmonizing legislation and looking at different laws, it also brings back. We're speaking about, and Ivan, I don't disagree with you, and I don't disagree with you with putting the age of selling cigarettes at 21. But then I can see the same side it goes. So then, why is
Legal
alcohol at
Oh,
18?
Do that too.
And- Ivan,
And voting age and
those-
these other little things. You're adult.
because we are looking at because it goes and Twila, I know we've had these conversations from the sexual and reproductive health aspect of things and looking at the age of consent and
Right.
when the age of consent is 16 but you cannot access medical care until you're 18 without an adult. So then
Consent for what? Why you get for lunch?
For sexual activity.
No. Consent for what you have for lunch. At
You see
16,
how- you
you
see the
can't be
bias?
consenting to sexual
You
activity.
see when
but
the bias
legally,
lie,
but
legally, you
legally
can.
that is the
You
age
can.
of consent.
So when we having the AG on the show, because I need to ask about this.
So the reason I brought it in is because we have all of these different ages. So you have 16 as the age of consent, 18 as the age that you can vote, you can drive, you can
drink.
legally buy alcohol, you can go to the doctor without parental consent, and you can get married. Don't do it. Not at 18. But then we're speaking
I
about
would say
being.
something else.
But we're speaking about then purchasing cigarettes at 18 or 21, and so there are these different
Right.
age ranges, and
Exactly.
that in and of itself tend to cause some confusion in the minds of the people. So
Right.
you tend to want to have one
Age thing.
age thing.
Well, then,
Exactly.
25 for everything.
Because you 40.
Yeah, ain't got a problem. No, think about it.
No,
like,
but no, but
honestly,
yeah, we
I
have
mean,
to-
I'm
we
probably
have to.
stretching it
Yeah.
a bit, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at the gravity of the situation, I'm concerned.
Right.
Like, I'm concerned. I have a 14-year-old, I have a 12-year-old. And the things that they're exposed to right now, it's frightening.
I mean, we've done sessions and
Yes.
episodes where we spoke about, and we're gonna go down a different path here right now. But we've spoke about the exposure to drug use in the high schools. We've had those conversations, and so now you add another drug to that list, because we spoke about the pills, we spoke about
The marijuana.
The marijuana,
We
and
spoke
now-
about the whatever they're putting in the water, everything that they're getting a high from.
and so now we're adding to that
Tobacco.
tobacco.
But you see, this is why legislation is one step towards many other mechanisms that need to be in place. Programs, positive engagement for our children. And remember, Sarah just said that persons don't usually start to smoke at adulthood. They usually start to smoke as children. So we as a community, as the adults, need to look and see what programs are in place to help curb those behaviors from very young. And ensuring that our children have enough to keep them occupied, keep them positive, keep them driven, so and understand why these things are bad for your health. And let me tell you, children know how to grab a concept when they need to. Valentine's I just went, my niece, she's in preschool. She's 3. She came home with a flyer to buy a basket. She don't know nothing about Valentine. She don't know nothing, but she know her mom need to buy the basket. And then she went sleep with the flyer under her arm. She's 3, and I'm serious. When she went to bed, I tried to do it. The girl went in the garbage for the flyer, but that's a different story.
No, but it
sticks.
speaks to teaching them
Exactly.
from young, and I agree. So that was kind of where I wanted to go next. We have the legislation. Hopefully we'll have the legislation. But what comes with
What
it?
after? So during this week we also met with health, education, social development, because it's not only a Ministry of Health drive. We have to rely on other partners. So we spoke about starting to create advocacy and put in prevention programs, not only to prevent the start, but persons who want to stop smoking. Remember, also people smoke because of mental reasons. It's their stress reliever. So we need to strengthen our mental health approach. And these are the conversations that we are currently having to formulate what is next step. So the legislation is just one bit in a whole big bucket, but we are getting there, and we have the passion. We said it. We survived COVID. So we do have the passion, and again, it involves all other sectors, not just health, right?
I think that's exactly it. The way you tackle something like this is, we talked about like everybody having a part to play in enforcement, but everybody has a part to play in kind of driving this forward as well. So in the international law that I spoke about, there's loads and loads and loads of different bits to it. And in the introduction to it, there is a specific kind of paragraph that talks about, it emphasises the role. It literally starts off by saying, emphasising the role of the community, of civil society, of advocacy, of the youth, of women, because I will often talk about how big the tobacco industry is, right? And the tobacco industry, I think that their gross market share is something like $900 billion US this year, right? And the amount they spend on marketing, wow, right? And the amount they spend on marketing, they're smart and they're savvy and they have tactics, and even the way a cigarette packet is designed, right, is designed to attract children. And there's a video that I've seen, and this is from the UK, and I think you've seen this as well, haven't you, where you see the children and you see them playing. You don't see that they're cigarette packs to start off with, do you? And they're looking at them, they're like, oh, it's so
nice.
pretty.
Yes.
It's so, oh, look, pink, 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 right? So you've got all of these children. And then as the camera pans back, you see they're playing with cigarette packs, right? And this isn't an accident, this is by design. And the way that we, as a community in Anguilla, as a wider global community, counteract this, because we can't necessarily do it with money unless you happen to have a 900 billion, and if you do, I'd really like to make friends with you, right? But if you don't have that amount of money, I will give up my job for 900 billion for you. But if you don't have that amount of money, then the way that you fight back is by working together as a community. And my background back in the UK, this is the first time I've worked for the government actually back in the UK. Before that, I worked for charities and I worked for advocacy, and my job before this was in a tobacco control charity, and it was campaigning, you know. And I know that the Ministry of Health can't do it by itself, politicians can't do it by itself, community groups can't do it by itself, a parent can't do it by themselves, an individual child can't do it by themselves, and everybody has to kind of work together and support each other. So we're here, and it's, you know what, it's absolutely great that, you know, you're saying this is what I want it to be stronger, I want us to do more, I want us to tackle more issues, and the Ministry of Health can't do that by itself.
Right.
And as Twyla said, the public consultation will be held in a couple of weeks. I won't be here, but I'll be joining virtually. This has to be within Anguilla, globally, it has to be all of us working together. And that's the way we fight the multi-billion pound industries that want to get our children to start smoking.
I hope that the legislation can speak to marketing as well.
Yes, it does.
It does.
Because that is, listen, that's what I do. When you started talking about it, I laughed because everything, like you said, down to the packaging, how it fits in your pants pocket, like the plastic to cover it, the feel of it. Look at all their logos. They are these either mythical creatures. They have these stories on the box. You're just naturally drawn to it. It's the same size as now if you buy a thing the gum in those. It like we are. I know we're programmed. Like this is what I do for a living, so I know how it's done. And it is actually the product placement in movies. It's like those scenes just before the action starts. They flick the cigarette away. You think it gives you the I pay attention to these things.
I'm actually glad that you went there, because in my head and listening to Sarah talk about the tobacco adverts that you see in the UK, very few
You don't see
people
them in the UK. We ban them. You might see them somewhere else.
Okay. because we get US television.
Yeah, but
and
you don't see them now anymore.
I don't see any, and very few people have cable. I still have cable, but I don't see any of those sorts of commercials and ads on TV. You see, it's very funny because, you know, just scrolling through the internet and you go, the way that American TV pushes their own prescription drugs, and that so it's the cultural differences that you would not necessarily get in the UK. Again, that cultural aspect and context comes into play when thinking about it.
Going back to the marketing and what else the legislation contains, it also talks about how you display the products in the supermarkets on the shelves. So you would not, once passed in its current form, you would not be able to go into the supermarket and see a cigarette or tobacco product. It should be away from the public's view, whether it's on the shelf, wherever they put them in a back room, wherever, you won't be able to go in.
4 cages and
if your cage
fingerprint scanner to get to it. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you really can't. The concept behind that, if you smoke, I mean, if you're going in the shop, you're looking for a hair product, and you go in and you browse and you don't see it, you're going to ask, right? So if you're a smoker and you want a cigarette, and you go and you look and you don't see it, you're going to ask. So therefore, we're not stopping anyone that chooses to buy cigarettes, but it resists the temptation of those who don't smoke and not looking for that to even consider picking one up off the shelf. So it also does that.
Yeah, like so for instance, and this is something like you don't really pay attention to it. There's a reason why the candies are there
course.
at the
Of course.
checkout register.
Oh, you don't pay attention when you got children. That's why they
That's by design,
That's
you
why you
know.
send them out before you go to pay. Okay, all that left now is to pay. Go ahead.
But tobacco companies and those that are interested in the sales understand these things too. So that's why they're
Right
there.
there.
You're standing up there. You're stressed in the line. Let me get a cigarette. Get what? 4 cages, a fingerprint scanner, so they could get this cigarette in the back of the back.
Yes.
I'm. You can call me a rebel. You can say what you want. I know when I'm again. 3 times the amount of people that died from COVID died from tobacco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more time. Sorry. I want you to get it. 3 times.
Yeah. And every year, right? So that number, the thing about COVID, like you said,
It
right?
does.
We are the
It's
north
escalated.
end of the
Yes.
pandemic, right?
Yes.
We are not the north end of the pandemic with tobacco. It continues to kill about 8 million people every year. And yeah, that's where our passion comes from, right? You know, that's
I
what
never-
kept our long distance relationship
It
going for
doesn't
5.5 years.
I have nothing else to say.
Yeah,
If that don't
5%.
convince you that something needs to be done, then something is wrong.
We have 13% of the population, adult population,
Exposed.
exposed.
And if you
That's a
smoke
large one.
and you're not able to quit, some people would say you've got a 50-50 chance. So some people would say that basically smoking kills half of the people if they're not able to quit in time. Recently, more people would say you've probably got a 30-70 chance. So you've got 30% chance of it not killing you. And if it doesn't kill you, like it may well still mean that, you know, you've lost your teeth or you can't breathe as well, or, you know, you're still having heart problems or whatever it might be.
Again, going back, listening and going back again, marketing and cultural differences. I know that there's a commercial that I see quite often. Smoking kills. Ask your doctor about the nicotine patch.
Sorry to laugh, but it's like,
No, but it's what's coming to mind. And are those things available here for persons who may want to say, okay, I know that this is bad for me, but this is so addictive. I want to stop, but I don't know how to stop. Is something like that, and we're not advertising for any particular brand, but
Yeah.
you know the products exist. Do we have access to them here?
So, we don't have any structured programs that exist currently to stop tobacco smoking or anyone that's addictive currently. I know the education in the school, they do have sessions as it gears to how to wean persons from smoking. Regarding the patch, they are not available in the public setting, but they are available in the private setting. There are patches that are available.
Okay. It's just good to know
that
into
thing,
that
speak
person.
to your doctor. Yeah, it's you. No, it's seriously because as Sarah indicated, there's a lot of times that you want to stop smoking in your mind. You intentionally want to stop, but it's an addiction, and addiction don't die overnight, and you're going to need support. And unfortunately, we don't have that formal support structure in place. But you can come into the public health center, any other polyclinics with a doctor, and they can assist you in making steps to smoking. So even if it's a setup with one-on-one counselors and different steps, so it's not a structured, formalized program, but there's a mechanism to help you to stop smoking if you're struggling with it.
And I think a really important message, because people kind of get confused, understandably, right, between how bad tobacco
Nicotine.
is and how bad nicotine is,
Yes.
right? Nicotine, you know what, is not actually that bad for you, right?
That's
So that's what gets you addicted. It's the tobacco that kills you, not the nicotine. So when, you know, and we've been kind of speaking about this a little bit this week, haven't
Yes.
we? And it might be something that we're able to look at kind of in the future, like after the legislation's passed. But we have programs in England, and lots of other countries have programs and things as well. And as part of our programs, if you are a smoker and you want to stop smoking, there are 2 important bits. So the first one is you get kind of counselling support, if you like. So there are like training packages, and we have these, and you can do them free online and stuff. So you can have somebody who's like a specialist in giving you the right support to help you stop smoking. That's really important. But the second thing is, and it's really important, that you get either like a safer form of nicotine, so nicotine patches, and you don't kind of think, oh, you know, like, oh, I don't want to be using nicotine. Like, you get as much nicotine as you need, right? Because actually, but not from tobacco. So,
Okay.
you get as much nicotine as you need from either patches or gums, and there's lots of different bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Because if you're not getting the nicotine you need, then you start craving the nicotine, and then you're more likely to go and pick up a cigarette, right?
Okay. Now
You're connected
I
to,
get
right?
the connection. Okay.
So like you patch yourself up and all of these kind of things, and it's that if you ask, like, if there's anybody listening who is a smoker and wants to stop, and you know you're thinking about getting nicotine patches and things, like, go for it, right? Nicotine, go for the nicotine, and use as much of it for as long as you need. I have friends who are ex-smokers, and they might have stopped smoking like 5-6 years ago, and you know what? They're still chewing the gum, right? And what we try and do in England is we might try and wean people off the gum over like a few weeks. But if you still need to use that gum, if you're using that gum for the rest of your life, but it's stopping you from smoking cigarettes, that is great, you know? It's the cigarettes that will kill you, not the nicotine.
Okay.
So, I just want to put this all together again. Chronic diseases are a problem. That's a given. We have things that we can't do anything about. You can't do anything about how old you get. Every year you gain an age. These are risk factors that we can't do anything about. We can't do anything whether we're born male or female. Well, but
We can't do anything about that.
your genetics, your family history, can't do anything about those things, right? But there are things that we can do something about. That at least 15 minutes of exercise weekly. At least looking at our consumption in terms of alcohol and limiting the amount that we take in. Looking at how we can curb and modify our eating habits to make it more healthier. And our tobacco, exposure to tobacco, not only smoking but also exposure. So one of those other things the law covers is the public places. We didn't speak about what is a public place and how far.
It's a public.
And if you're smoking, you'll have to be 10 feet away from a public place. But nonetheless, saying this to say, doing a tobacco legislation is just one measure to the larger NCD response. Little by little, we are going to get there. It's a very small unit, but all hands on deck, all sectors approach. It can make its way through. We are hoping by the time we repeat the STEP survey in a couple of years, we do see a marketable difference. We're not counting the 3 years with COVID, so take that away. That did not exist. So we started in 2016 after we had the data. They were taking away the 3 years, so this is some actions post the survey, right? So I just want to say that we not to look at it in a silo, but it is a measure towards the bigger response.
I am so glad that you kind of brought it all together. Just for the listening public, when can we expect to see this go to the House of Assembly, have its first read? Is this something that we're expecting in a couple of weeks, couple of months? How close are we to having that? Approximately.
Let me say this without putting myself. We are closer than we were 3 years ago.
Okay.
No, after having these conversations, we are going to, of course, put a report in place in terms of what the week to look like, suggestions. We did carry the draft bill to council last week. They would have sent back what their concerns are, but it is on the schedule for this year to go to the House of Assembly. I anticipate that it would be sometimes before our summer festival, but that is me. Things happen all the time. There come a lot of things competing. Can I say, he seems to be very busy, I definitely I do not envision having 2023 passing without it having the reading in the House of Assembly.
And the consultations and everything to follow. I mean, part and parcel of this too is the AG's office is inundated. There's a lot
Yes,
of
it's a
legislative
lot.
changes happening. Usually what happens on this show, if you speak right into the camera, it activates like this red phone in the premier's office. Tell him what you want. Trust me, he gets it. So if you want it by me, premier, you want this on the floor by me. Trust me, it happens. And if that don't, I'll just send a little note
You got
because
a link.
it's important. I mean,
Yeah.
and I don't want to preempt anything, because but from a health perspective, there are a lot of critical things happening.
It's true.
A lot of critical things happening where health is concerned, so this is not going to escape it. And what I will do, even when we leave this show, I will start the conversation and I'll start lobbying for 25 years.
You picked up on how lobbying
Yeah,
is
yeah.
As long as it's for good, I don't have a problem.
Yeah, trust me, I understand that the conversation has to happen.
Yes.
Like it did here today. And we want to thank you for coming. We want to thank you for making the time. You don't have to worry. You just let me know through Glenn because I take instructions from her. True, I take all the instructions from her. This is not anything to do with Ivan. She tells me when to show up. She tells me where to sit, and I
you
play
go.
my part.
Yeah.
Yep, I understand how this works. I understand how this works.
And that goes to the saying that there's a woman behind every moving vehicle, just saying. Anything that making progress, there's a woman driving.
Why did I would not deny this. I would not deny this at all.
So smart. But I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for being here, Twyla and Sarah. And Twyla, Sarah, I know you have to leave us, but Twyla, I look forward to having you back, and we can have a deeper discussion on addiction and how addiction affects, the NCDs and the chronic diseases. And so looking forward to that deeper conversation. So I'm telling you, know exactly what we're going to be talking about next time.
See, she's doing it to you too. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions about the pending legislation, where we're going with the tobacco legislation, any further questions you want to ask, anything, how do folks get in contact?
Well, you can contact us at the Ministry of Health.
Okay.
And the Ministry of Health, the direct line is 497-3930. They're free to send me an email as well, Twyla, Twyla, .Bradshaw, all Anguillians know how to spell Bradshaw, by the way. Bradshaw, hyphenated Richardson, at gov.ai. So it's Twyla.Bradshaw, hyphenated Richardson, at gov.ai. And the program officer as well for NCDs is Lavelle Niles. You can also reach out to her as well. We have our Chief Medical Officer and our health planner, acting PS, Rochelle Rogers as well. Feel free to reach out to any one of us. If you don't remember any name, anyone in health, I am almost certain that they can champion for our legislation and be able to answer any question there is.
Awesome. Anything from you, Sarah, before we leave?
I just wanted to say we've been having a brilliant long distance relationship. I work with lots of people and it's not just Anguilla, and I wanted to just say that I think Twyla is one of the smartest, savviest and most passionate women I've had the pleasure of working with over the last 5.5 years.
Awesome.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate you. Anything from you?
No, that's it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another excellent episode of Progress Report. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our supporters. We have Cool FM, Radio Anguilla, Upbeat Radio,
New Beginning.
NBR, New Beginning Radio. We have Advent Radio. We have every streaming platform out there. So whether you're using Apple Stream, whether you're using whatever your phone streams, we're there. Just search Progress Report, Government of Anguilla. We have local cable. We have YouTube. We have Facebook. We're everywhere. Don't miss it. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.